and I call this meeting to order. Madam City Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Crancho,
Present.
Councilmember Camarena,
Present.
Councilmember Marroquin,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott,
Present.
Mayor Carter.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Could you please join us as Councilmember Crankshaw would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready, begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing as Mayor Pro Tem Elliott leads us in the invocation.
Should we pray? Once again, our Father, we're so thankful for your kindness towards us, the many blessings that we enjoy day by day, often take for granted, the peace, the stability, the prosperity that we live in compared to many other parts of the world. And we pray for wisdom, Father, about all the things that we're dealing with today as a city to help improve our city, make it a better place. But we want to ask you, Father, for wisdom from above as we deal with all these things. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Madam City Attorney, do you have any reports from closed session?
No reportable action from this closed session, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Now is the time for public comments of any items on this agenda. The City Council welcomes your input. At this time, remember the public may address the City Council or any other matter not listed on the posted agenda. Pursuant to the Brown Act, no action will be taken or any issue brought forth under public comments. We ask that you please complete a speaker slip and submit it to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting. Although you are not required to identify yourself, this information on the speaker slip assists the mayor that all persons wishing to address the council are recognized and also assist the city clerk in preparing the city council meeting minutes. Unless the mayor extends the time, there is a 3-minute time limit for each public presentation. Any information provided on the speaker slip is voluntarily and will be public records. At this time, we do have one public comment. Peter Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, members of the council and audience. My public comment is based on the First Amendment right. I need to correct you, Councilwoman Carter. In the newspaper, you made a comment about Adams Park. From west to east, we have the pavilion, and we have the dog park, and we have the skate park. And at the end, what used to be Adams Park, we have the aquatic center. To me, that was misleading the public, and that needs to be corrected because I'm not against the policy about what you need to do with the homeless population. But providing false information is incorrect and unethical. See, our right to speak here is based on the First Amendment. A couple of weeks ago, you made a comment calling me a keyboard talker. Well, this is my lane. This is my arena. You said to stay in your lane, this is my arena. Recently, you made a comment about the file a police report. Go ahead. I got no problem doing it. You're doing it. That's your right. But my right to speak, my right to fact check you is my given right. The right to speak here is my given right. My right to speak on social media is my given right. You yourself, as a councilwoman, violated your own city council social media policy. And that needs to be checked. Any member of the news media, you want to get hold of me? Here I am. I'm here to answer any questions. But you did need to be fact checked on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't address that until the end, but I will address your comment. Thank you, though. Okay, do we have any online?
None.
No, thank you.
Madam Mayor, this is Greg May of Preston Hollow Community Capital. I submitted a meeting slip for the request to speak that was acknowledged by Ms. Wiles. May I address the council?
Yes, that was for an agenda item number 5. I was gonna
Yeah, should-
allow you.
Madam
Should we wait till, to get to that, or should I go now?
Madam Mayor, Mr. May, obviously, when we get to that agenda item, you have every right to speak. I do want you to know that the city council received the email from your attorney, and they will be continuing the matter and not acting on it today.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, consent agenda items, 1 through 3.
We're pulling item number 3.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so items 1 and 2.
We
May
need
I
a-
have a motion and a second to adopt consent items 1 and 2, please?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. New business. The fiscal year 2025-26, the proposed budget. Andy Heath, our interim finance director.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Andy Heath, financial consultant to the city of Centro. What I'll be doing tonight is actually giving you a presentation on the upcoming year, fiscal year, which begins July 1st, just about a week and a half from now, for the budget for fiscal year 25-26. First thing I want to do is really just go out of my way to really thank staff for all the work that they put into this budget this year. It's been a long year. There's been a lot done this year, and I do have a slide showing you what has been accomplished since I've been assisting the finance department over the course of the last year or so. But staff this year, when we put the budget together, based on all the things that we had done up to putting the budget together, really showed up. We had significant meetings with department heads, all the department heads in the city. We had meetings with division managers, staff members, and really thought out what I believe is a very robust, a very immersive budget for this city in the coming year. It addresses a lot of the things that I have heard from the council dais over the course of the last year. It addresses a lot of funding issues. It addresses significant funding issues that you may have thought that you had in the past that may not exist anymore. And it really addresses delivering services to the wide array of programs and things that you do for your city across all departments and all divisions. So as we go through this presentation today, you're going to see that. I think that, again, that staff has really showed up and really contributed to a great degree in assisting putting this budget together that you're going to see. As part of today's presentation, what I'll do is I'll go through an overview of the proposed budget development process. We'll look at the citywide budget as a whole, and you see that the citywide budget is a very large budget. You got a lot of money that we're asking for from an appropriation perspective, which means we're asking for a lot of money that we can spend on some of the things that your council wants to do in the future. We'll look at the general fund specifically, and then an update to that forecast for the general fund. So I believe this will be the 4th time that this body, the city council, in the last year has seen an update to this general fund forecast. And that's very important. You need to watch how this forecast is evolving over time so that you can continue to make good decisions at the dais regarding the spending of the money in the future. Similarly, like the general fund, we have a forecast for the Measure P fund. So once we go through the Measure P fund itself, we'll look at the forecast and what that has on tap. Then we'll go through the other fund groups. So I've grouped all the other funds, and keep in mind that this city has 90 funds, okay? That's a lot of funds, okay? Each one of those funds individually has its own budget, okay? So each one of these funds has to be thoroughly analyzed, thoroughly reviewed, and then you have a department head or a division manager here that actually manages what goes on in each one of these funds. So we have tried to vet out all of the information in these funds to put it together for you. And then ultimately, we'll be asking for budget approval, looking at next steps and any questions you might have. Okay, final budget development process. So what did we really look at moving forward to prepare this budget? So as you know, we did prepare and adopt a fiscal year 24-25 budget for the current year. We actually went through and we did that for the major funds in an updated format. Your council did adopt a budget for the current year prior to July 1st, okay? But your council also directed that that budget be redone and be brought back ultimately to the council at a later date. And what we did was we actually went through and looked at the major funds, which were the general fund, the Measure P fund, and both of the main enterprise funds for water and wastewater. And we brought back those budgets to you on July 31st, okay, for approval. Those budgets were approved. And ultimately, we then looked at all the funds in the city and brought back to you a comprehensive overview of the fiscal 24-25 budget on December 3rd, where you again adopted what we called a revised budget for the current fiscal year 24-25. We then did preparation and ultimate adoption of a mid-year update where we looked at things as they were unfolding for the current fiscal year, and we brought that back to the council on April 15th. So your council did consider that. You looked at the mid-year budget and ultimately you approved that on April 15th. We've presented the general fund and the Measure P fund forecast information to the city's ad hoc finance committee several times, and ultimately the city council on some of those occasions as well. So you've been made very aware on the well-beingness of your general fund and your Measure P fund on an ongoing basis. And that's very important again for decision making. We did meet with all city department heads, management on multiple times to discuss 25-26 budget needs, the updated fund balances, which is basically how much money do you have? So when you're looking at approving tonight's budget, you're going to see an appropriation authority or spending authority that we're asking for. But that doesn't mean you don't have any money left in the bank if you spend all that. So those fund balances are very important. How much is going to be left, assuming you spend all the money that we're asking for next year? And then ultimately, we are presenting your budget to you tonight for ultimate approval moving forward. Okay, looking at the citywide budget. So this is the citywide budget as a whole. So this is all 90 funds, and you can see that I've rolled them up into a variety of different fund groups in some cases. General fund, Measure P fund. The enterprise funds includes 3 funds, so water, wastewater, and stormwater. Not stormwater, solid waste. And then you have special revenue. That's what SR stands for, special revenue funds. There are multiple funds in each one of those groups for a variety of purposes. Capital projects funds, debt service funds, internal service funds, and successor agency funds, which is your former redevelopment agency. What we're asking for tonight from a funding perspective, an appropriation level perspective, is for you to approve a budget for fiscal 25-26 that encompasses $162,458,817 in spending. So the city of El Centro, we're asking for $162 million and change budget for next year. Of all of those funds, of which there are 90, you can see that there are basically 2 funds and a group of funds, which is 3 funds in the enterprise fund. So 5 funds out of those 90 comprise 61% of the entire budget for the city. Okay, so your general fund obviously is your largest fund. Then you, on an individual basis, then you have the Measure P fund, which has a lot of activity in it. And then your 3 enterprise funds make up about $34 million worth of activity. Okay, but again, 61% of the entire budget for the city is in those 5 funds. Okay, so that's where most of your work is done. Looking at the citywide capital, okay, so this is capital citywide, not just to a particular fund, but citywide. What is built into capital this year is just under $52 million of that $100+ million budget is specifically for capital. So some of the noted capital projects and outlay that I've mentioned there are good.
Excuse me, can you give me just one
You
second?
bet,
We're trying
no
to get the
problem.
screens up for the council to be able to,
Just come sit
it's
here.
not gonna work.
No, just have her come sit here. We'll trade.
It's not up on mine
Oh,
either.
okay.
No, it's.
Let's reboot it. You want mine?
Sorry, Andy.
That's
Is it going
fine.
there?
No,
No?
no.
Yeah, there's nothing we can do.
There it goes.
No, Michaela's gonna try.
Besides, not on Marty's and ours, oh, Sylvia's.
That's all right, I'll just watch it.
Thank you.
We good?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Getting back to capital. So as I mentioned, there's about just under $52 million in capital that is being recommended for the coming year. Many of the things that are in these capital projects are carryovers from the current year. So to the extent, obviously, some capital projects are very large and you can't complete them in 1 year. So what happens is the money that was appropriated that year is then moved over into the subsequent year and ultimately added perhaps to additional funding that might be available for the furtherance of that project. So much of this is carryover. But some of the noted projects I've noted here, so you have just under $1.7 million of ADA improvements. Most of those improvements are in Measure P. Actually, I think all of them are in Measure P. In conversations with the department head about the ADA improvements, it's probably unlikely that the city can undertake $1.7 million of ADA improvements in 1 year. But to the extent that's not done, it's still appropriated for that purpose, but we will just flow into the next year, assuming that that budget is ultimately approved. So several projects on here are like that. The Valley Point Center is another good example of that. That was budgeted this year, but it did not commence. So we're budgeting $3.5 million next year to try to get that done. And that is also at Measure P. You have some vehicles on there, police vehicles. You have a lot of streets projects, La Boucherie widening, Dannenberg rehabilitation, other street improvements out of your FHA fund. Imperial Avenue, drainage projects. You have a lot of parks projects on there. Gomez Park project, which is funded by a Prop 68 grant, $4.5 million there. That's a great project. Then you have Clean California grant that is paying for the Downtown Square project. Police station. So most of the money that has been allocated has been spent for the police station and the building of that. But there's another just under $8 million budgeted next year. And that money is available in a variety of funds. But one thing I can tell you is that the $2 million that was budgeted for next year for the police station out of Measure P is not needed. Okay. So Measure P actually saved that money going to the police station project, because what happened is that money was actually sitting in a bond trustee account, rightfully so. That's where bond funds are held. And that bond trustee account earned a significant amount of interest to the point where it is now saving the Measure P fund from having to give over $2 million, which was originally budgeted for that project. So that is a very, very good development. But you can see here, again, across the array and the spectrum of what the city does, you have pretty much everything covered when it comes to capital. Okay, let's move into the general fund, talk specifically about the general fund. So for fiscal 24-25, we have that's the current year. By the time we're done, we're anticipating that you're going to add just over $3 million back to reserves. That means at the end of the day, the city will have realized $3 million more in revenues than it's expected to be spent by the end of the year, which ends in a week. The updated expected results for the balance of the year are all built in to the forecast that you're going to be seeing. And essentially, you know, that anticipated surplus there's a lot of one-time stuff in there. There were some grants that were received that are one-time from the state. You have your opioid funding. If I can say that right. Opioid funding that has been added in there as well. That's a reserve on fund balance, so that can only be spent in a certain way, but it is in the general fund. And in talking with the interim finance director, I have recommended that we actually move that to a police grants fund, so that it's isolated from the general fund and not commingled with general fund monies. So we can spend that appropriately out of that fund. So we may do that in the coming year. But a variety of reasons, you did have some salary savings, obviously, that accrued this year over time by not filling all those positions. We budget appropriately for that. But we're looking at about $3 million being added to general fund reserves by the end of this year. For next year, you can see that we have an anticipated surplus of significantly less, essentially a balanced budget. When you look at the size of the general fund budget, which is $50 million, anticipated surplus to reserves of just under 18,000. Okay, that number is purposeful. Okay, that number is derived through a series of things, but mainly one thing that I'll cover in just a sec. The forecasted amounts are prepared on a conservative basis. So we've looked at your property tax growth. I think we've put 2.5 or 3% in there, which is what it's been over the last several years. Sales tax growth is based on HDL's forecast that we work with, and then what we're seeing in the local economy. Certain other revenues are nominal growth, not significant growth, but nominal growth. Similarly, we've built in expenditure growth based on inflation and based on what we know costs will be. I have a slide specific to that. Fully loaded salaries and salary savings are built in. We have budgetary policy and funding changes that make up a large portion of the budget that I have a specific slide for. And then getting back to how we got so close to a balanced budget, the 17,000. Your budget for fiscal 25-26, that $49.6 million in change includes a $2 million placeholder. Okay, it includes a $2 million placeholder for future citywide staffing costs, recognizing that your city does have on the table right now and is in the process of completing a comprehensive salary and compensation survey citywide. So what we've done is in putting the whole budget together, we added everything up, got to the bottom line, funded what we thought needed to be funded, put everything on the table, and ultimately your surplus for next year was $2,017,662. So we pulled that $2 million out, put it in a placeholder so that there is funding, at least at some level, that's available for the city council and the city itself to address some of the issues associated with what may come out of the compensation survey as that information is received by the city. So that is very purposeful. It's specifically appropriated. That's the way the budget's being recommended at this point. Looking at your general fund revenues and some of the key items, actually property tax, I have a 2.5% growth in property taxes in there. So ironically, just today, we did receive the final payment for the secured property taxes for the current fiscal year, and property taxes are looking good. And in fact, we may be able to up that budget a little bit when we come back in the first quarter, once we know exactly what the growth is going to be. But property taxes are looking good. Anticipated sales tax revenues are based on the current state of the economy. I mentioned that, and they are built into the forecasts. Slight increase in TOT just based on inflation. So as inflation goes up, room rates go up. As room rates go up, your collection of TOT goes up because it's a percentage of what's collected from rooms. Conservative projections for development and recreation related revenues. So those grow nominally. And then we do have a $2.25 million transfer in from Measure P to cover the fiscal 24-25 general fund costs for police, fire, non-personnel costs, supplies, and capital. Okay, so those are some of the key revenue items coming into the general fund. Okay, we're going to add to this. Here's some more general fund items. Okay, and these are your new budget approach items. So as your city council knows, over the last couple of meetings, we have been coming back and we've been mentioning certain things that may aid the budget in the future, that could involve policy changes, could involve just approach changes on the way you approach your budget and how different things are funded, could involve a number of things. But we have been looking at all those over the last year. It's been a very busy year. And the amount of things that your finance department has accomplished and ultimately built into the budget and all the forecasting is phenomenal. To do everything that's been done in a year and get to this point is crazy. Okay, so these are very positive things, but in a nutshell, you have an additional $690,000 transfer in from Measure P to cover the fiscal 24-25 general fund costs for parks and recreation temporary salaries. Okay. What we tried to do with this is actually identify some programmatic things that Measure P can pay for. And keep in mind that we were looking for any type of possible ancillary funding source outside the general fund to free up general fund money for compensation survey results. Okay, so we were looking at everything. So this is kind of just putting everything on the table and putting the budget together and putting it out there. There's no magic to identifying temporary salaries in Parks and Recreation, other than it just being something that I thought was programmatic. Okay, so you have a lot of temporary people actually. Okay, and as you'll see a little bit later in the budget presentation, a lot of those temporary people were actually full-time and have been working for you for multiple years, if not a decade. Okay, we've actually taken those temporary positions and made them full-time. There's 17 of those that are built into the budget. So all these budget numbers include all that as well. But you still have a huge contingent of temporary staffing that fund your Parks and Rec program, particularly the Aquatic Center, MLK Center, MLK Court, and the youth and senior services that your city provides. A significant amount of temporary salaries, to the point where it takes people that work 10, 20 hours a week. It takes almost $700,000 worth of those people to make these programs go. So that's all I did there, was just identify a type of program. Now, ironically, if there's some issue with funding, with using Measure P to fund salaries, you could also use Measure P to fund programmatic services associated with Parks and Rec for the things that I just mentioned, the Aquatic Center, youth and senior services, because the amount of material, services, and supplies that you pay for already for police and fire out of Measure P, for those three units, those recreation units, is pretty much exactly the same as that $690,000. So you could swap that out and turn that around and pay for material, supplies, and services for Aquatic Center, youth, and adult services, and save from saying that you're using it for salaries. Just wanted to bring that up. There's also $310,000 in funding that's built in for a transfer from your Section 115, which is a trust fund that's set aside specifically for your OPEB, other post-employment benefits that have specifically to do with retiree health. We brought this back to the council, said we were going to do some research. So I find out that we actually have just over $11 million in that trust fund, and your liability for your OPEB is just over $5 million. Okay, so you're $5 million, $6 million overfunded with that fund. Most of that has been interest. It has been earned in the last 10 years since you initially funded that, but you have never touched this fund. Okay, and now you're overfunded, and you can only use what's in that fund for retiree health and things related to retiree health. So we have built in what we pay for retiree health this year, which is about $200,000 a year. And then we've built in what's called an implicit subsidy amount that is noted in the actuary report that we have done every year for the OPEB plan. And that implicit subsidy is what the current membership in health, what your current employees actually subsidize into retirement, and that's the rate that's called out. So 110,000 there. So 310,000 on an ongoing basis is now going to come into your general fund to cover those costs that were already borne by the general fund. 200,000 in funding as an infusion from the city's Section 115, another Section 115 plan. City's very well prepared, okay, and always has been, from your Section 115 retirement trust fund held with PARS. Right around $5 million in that trust fund. And what we've done with this is we've actually taken $200,000 and covered a portion of the increase in the UAL. That's significantly more than 200,000, but didn't want to blow it all at once. Okay, so we added 200,000 in. Could add more if you wanted to. But we have that 200,000 built in for every year in the forecast, if you're going to see, which is all the way through 2930. Okay. So that has been built in. 200,000 there. And then we have a just under a $6.2 million one-time transfer from your overfunded internal service fund. We've also talked to the city council about this on several occasions, where you have an unemployment fund that funds unemployment, leave balance payoffs, and formerly your retiree health, okay? And then workers' compensation, okay? And you have one for health benefits. What has happened over the last several years, 5, 6, 7 years, is all of those are funded with a rate from payroll. So a percentage is derived, and that percentage is never changed until the current year. In the current year, we change it for workers' comp. But that percentage is just basically whatever the payroll is, that percentage is applied to everybody's payroll. It's taken out of the fund that pays for that position, and it's put over into this internal service fund to pay for the things that workers' comp pays for, which is your workers' compensation premium, health benefits, et cetera. What has happened over those several years, 5 to 10 years, is that you have overfunded those amounts. So you've been paying the premiums all along, just like you should, but the amount of money that comes in from all the funds that have staff, namely the general fund, wastewater fund, and water fund, have been funding too much into these funds to the point where it's safe to say that the general fund can receive back just under $6.2 million as a one-time transfer back to reserves in the current for the coming year. So we have that budgeted. And you'll see that also budgeted in the water and wastewater funds as well for their component of it. On the expenditure side, so we have full funding built in for positions in the general fund for the entirety of the year. Okay, so we assume every position's filled. Okay, and then we make some exceptions. So funding for 244.45 FTE, that's full-time equivalents in the general fund, is in there. And then we build in a vacancy savings credit like we have in the past. It's not as much as it has been in the past. So, okay. So in the past, 10 months ago, when we brought back your revised budget, that vacancy savings factor was pretty large because your police and fire departments had a lot of vacancies. Okay. And at that point in time, we didn't know that they were going to be able to very quickly fill the majority of those positions to the point where right now you don't have any vacancies in your fire department. And you only have, I think, 2 in your police department. Okay, so all of your positions are now filled. We've analyzed that, looked at it, and right now there's actually about $2.3 to $2.4 million worth of vacancies in your city's general fund. So what we've built in is 33% of those vacancies as a vacancy savings factor. So there's about $800,000, $874,000 built in, significantly less than what it's been in the past. We have a $685,000 increase for general fund portion of the unfunded liability. So there you go. Your unfunded liability is going up almost $700,000 from the current year into next year. That's a cost that has to be paid by the general fund. There's no choice in that. That's what we're using that $200,000 for from that retiree trust fund, that 115 trust fund. And then elimination of the $800,000 in unemployment internal service charges based on prior overfunding. So that's what the general fund was contributing to this unemployment fund. We're going to eliminate that fund entirely, rebudget all that other stuff because there really wasn't a whole lot in that budget to begin with, and move that $800,000 back. And similarly, the couple $100,000 back to the general fund and enterprise funds respectively. Increase in the liability and property insurance. You have an additional $412,000 that is going to be due in the coming year. That's nothing new. Seeing that pretty much in every jurisdiction statewide for liability and property insurance costs. Costs transferred out to water and sewer funds are $45,000, and that is basically your cost allocation plan. Okay. Water and sewer pay their portion of the administrative components associated with what's costed in the general fund. It's all costed there, and then we do a calculation to figure out how much the water fund and how much the wastewater fund ultimately has to pay for those functions. Appropriation for one-time payment of up to $6.5 million for the ECRMC transfer. So that is built into the budget right now. That's consistent with the term sheet that was previously approved. by the council earlier this year. So that $6.5 million is built in as a one-time appropriation, and I believe that covers $5 million for the transfer itself, and then $1.5 million in closing costs. And then we have a placeholder, as I mentioned, of $2 million built into the budget for future citywide staffing. A lot going on. Okay, these are the staffing notes. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we did reclassify 17 FTE from temporary to full-time positions based on the ongoing number of hours worked. So that added about $330,000 to the general fund budget. Okay, that $330,000 is essentially what it costs to provide those positions with benefits. Okay, where they weren't receiving benefits before. So some of them weren't getting CalPERS or weren't in CalPERS, but they should have been. And similarly, they weren't receiving health benefits and they should have been. So those 17 FTE have that added back. Then we have 9 positions. We have 5 new positions and 4 reclassified positions that are built into the general fund. There were many more positions that were discussed and vetted out with all of the department heads as we went through the budget process. These were the ones that we thought resonated the most with the service levels that needed to be provided to the community and some of the things that were the most direly needed by the city. So again, no magic to this other than what I just told you. You have a police lieutenant that is coming from a commander position, which is a higher position. So that's actually a credit back to the general fund, $27,000. Custodians being added for the police building because the police building is new. It's going to need its own custodian. If you didn't have a custodian for the police building, you would have contracted cleaning costs for the police building. Deputy fire chief from a battalion chief, slightly higher cost for that, $24,000. Just recognizing that the fire department should probably be set up in the same way the police department is in terms of a command structure. They don't have that right now. Senior traffic signal technician from equipment operator. That's something that Public Works and Engineering asked for, $7,300 incremental cost there. Secretarial assistant for building and CDBG. This is split funded. So the building department, I think, is paying for 60%, and CDBG is paying for 40%, just under $38,000 to the general fund there. Project manager, civil design to help with some of the capital projects out there. You have a $50+ million capital project budget, okay? And you're really up against the wall when it comes to getting some of these projects underway and ultimately completed when you have very limited staff to assist with that. So adding as many engineers and project managers as you can to assist the capital projects effort is critical moving forward. 2 parks maintenance workers, 1 for the downtown area that has been discussed by the council, and 1 for the lighting and landscaping districts that has already been approved as part of those engineering reports by the city council. And then a staff assistant from a library assistant for the city's library, $3,600 incremental cost there. So all of those positions, when you take the bottom line on what they're likely to cost in the future on an ongoing basis, just under $250,000 to the general fund. Okay, let's move on to the forecast. So this is what your forecast looks like. Okay, and please keep in mind that this forecast encompasses everything I just talked about that would be ongoing. And also keep in mind that one of those things I talked about that is ongoing is that $2 million that's built in for a labor placeholder in 25-26. So what this is saying from a forecast perspective is all those numbers, starting with the $17,000 number and then moving to the right, would be higher by $2 million if we didn't have that placeholder, okay? As you can see, we have pretty much a balanced budget for the coming year. And then in 26-27, a year from now, it looks like it's going to be about 670 surplus. 716 surplus, 400 surplus, and $1 million surplus in 29-30. Many of these surpluses ebb and flow for one reason, and that's because of the CalPERS UAL. So whatever those actuarial tables are telling us the UAL costs are likely to be in the future, we have built into this. Your UAL tables will be updated, okay, in the next couple of months. So in July or no later than August, CalPERS will release your new actuarial reports to every city in the state, every city, county, et cetera. And we will know what these new numbers are. Once we have those new numbers, we're going to build that into these models that we've done. Take 5 minutes to do that. And we're going to see what the impact ultimately will be now or a month or two from now on that. More than likely, the next actuary report will have lower costs for 2 years from now because CalPERS beat their return last year. Okay, so that's what's likely to ensue. So far this year, markets are doing good. I'm optimistic that if they hold in the next week, CalPERS will again at least make their discount rate, okay, where you don't have an issue associated with increasing unfunded liabilities, okay, and maybe they will decrease a little bit. However, having said that, keep in mind that CalPERS is doing what's called an experience and modification study, where they're actually going in every 4 years, and this is one of the years they're doing that, and they look at all the things that go into their preparation of the actuary report and how they're doing for each city. They assume 2.8% payroll growth each year. So if you've had more than 2.8% payroll growth over that 4-year period, your UAL is going to go up a little bit, okay? Because they didn't assume that, and they assumed 2.8. And then in the future, they want to make sure they're accounting for what you're doing. Similarly, the age of people are retiring, the age of people are living till. All these things go into their actuary report, so they adjust all these things every 4 years and then redo those reports. So that's coming. It'll likely be a year from now that we get that, but just keep in mind that that is coming. One thing I wanted to point out with this slide also is the surplus that's likely to ensue this year, that $3.1 million. So you can see there, I do have the sources of the surplus. You have the opioid funding, RIP-TIF funding, which is your redevelopment property tax trust fund money that comes in the form of property tax now that used to be former redevelopment tax increment. There's some one-time money that's coming in there. State grants, and then you have ARPA interest. So the interest earned on your ARPA fund was in the ARPA fund, but you never appropriated that. Okay, the interest should have been in the general fund, so we moved that back, and that's about $600,000 or $700,000 on a one-time. That's part of that 3.1 million. So your forecasts look very good in the general fund. Bottom line, general fund balance. Here is where your fund balance lies. So this assumes everything I just talked about comes to fruition. So this assumes that you spend all the money that I just talked about in the general fund, just under $50 million. Also assumes we bring in just about that much in the coming year. And then if all those forecasts come to fruition in the future, your reserves would fluctuate between 30 and 33 million bucks, basically, in the general fund. Okay. What this doesn't include is something that, if you look at your financial report that is issued for fiscal 22-23, and it's a sidebar note, I will say that we are almost ready with the 23-24, which will bring your audits current. And the auditors have been on site for the 23-24 audit, and that should be done pretty quick, actually. So audits are getting caught up, which is a very good thing. But if you did look at your audits, you're going to see a general fund balance that is different than anything you're seeing in these forecasts. And that's because in the audits, they roll 3 funds into your general fund. They roll the general fund proper. They also roll Measure P into your general fund, okay? And they roll Fund 606, I believe it is, which is your PARS trust fund, okay? So in addition to this $30 million in your general fund balance, it's indicated by this forecast, you have 4 million plus, almost 5 million actually, in that PARS trust fund for retirement that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so this is just your baseline forecast observations and some of the things that are built in. So budgets are essentially balanced with the updated assumptions and policy considerations. So we've added a lot of policy considerations here. The 25-26 budget and future forecasts do include that $2 million staff placeholder that I did talk about. The general fund investment in public safety non-personnel and the parks and recreation temporary staffing and or non-personnel for those 3 budget units that I mentioned is about $2.94 million annually. General fund portion of annual CalPERS UAL costs is expected to increase approximately $1.5 million in the next 4 years. So based on what you're paying today and ultimately what you're likely to pay in 29-30, it's $1.5 million more. All that's been built in to all those numbers you've seen in the forecast. And the fully loaded costs of providing 1% of salary to all employees citywide, just update this number based on, staffing and all that, is just over 200,000 now. So if you gave everybody across the board, effective July 1st, 2025, a 1% raise in the city, every position, it would cost you an additional $200,000 fully loaded in the general fund. All right, let's move on to Measure P. So Measure P, you can see here, $8.5 million in revenues in the current year, at 12.9 million in expenditures. Keep in mind that the use of Measure P for things that are capital in nature ebbs and flows with when that capital money is actually spent. So you may save a lot of Measure P money over years for a specific capital item like the police station that Measure P funded $7 million for. And ultimately, in 1 year, you're going to have a lot more expenditures than the revenue because the revenue is fixed. You only get about $8 million a year in property tax for Measure P. So we're spending a lot more money than we are anticipating bringing in the current year. And similarly, next year, there's a $15 million budget that we're asking for, about an $8.7 million revenue stream. So revenue stream only includes two things. It includes the Measure P sales tax, and it also includes interest earnings on the fund balance in Measure P. Sales tax projections are again based on the forecast, just like we do for the general fund. We get that for the Measure P fund. We have funding for police and fire non-personnel. That's $2.25 million. Talked about that a couple of times already. We also have funding for the temporary parks recreation staffing, and that's $690,300. The Measure P fund capital budget, $8.2 million. Are we good? Okay. All right. Measure P fund capital budget, $8.2 million. Police vehicles, $785,000 for vehicles and equipment. Fire, you have SCBA SCBA filling system, actually. An alerting system, radio upgrades, $792,000. ADA improvements, $1.65 million. We talked about that. A lot of different things coming out of Measure P from all different facets of programs in the city. At the end of the day, assuming we spend that $15 million that's budgeted, and further assuming that we spend the $12.9 million in the current year, you're still going to have $6.5 million in fund balance at the end of next year in Measure P. So Measure P is very well funded as well. Here's the array of things that Measure P pays for. So I put a pie chart together just to show you the number of programs, departments, services, and the array of those services that are funded by Measure P. So you've got a citywide representation of how Measure P is spent here. You got a lot of money for general administrative, public safety.
We also have funding for the temporary parks, recreation staffing, and that's $690,300. The Measure P fund capital budget, $8.2 million.
The recording.
Measure P fund capital budget, $8.2 million. And that's
You recognize that voice?
All right, there we go.
Live stream.
Okay, so just again, this pie chart just shows you where the money's going, where it's being spent. I just wanted to show you that you have an array of services that are being funded. This is your Measure P forecast, and this shows you how the use of Measure P ebbs and flows. So if you go back to 21-22 and 22-23, you can see that you put money back in the bank, and that's because you were saving the Measure P money for its expenditure in 23-24 and 24-25, and ultimately in the coming year as well, 25-26. A lot of that money is for the Valley Point Center, and a lot of the money is for the police station and the funding that went from Measure P for the new police station. If you look in the future, though, you're going to see that Measure P levels itself out. And ultimately, when you remove all that one-time stuff, keeping in mind that you're including all of the things that Measure P pays for annually, which I have a slide for, you're still putting back every year 1.7 to almost $1.9 million. So that is the surplus that accrues to Measure P right now every year. Okay, so that is money that you can use for future capital. That is money that is in addition to the $6.5 million fund balance that you're going to have at the end of 25-26. Okay, so Measure P is in good shape. What you see here is at the bottom, before I go through the fund balance, is all of the ongoing costs funded by Measure P. So these are built into every year in the forecast. So Measure P pays for $510,000 for non-public safety department operating costs. So there's an array of public works types things, administrative type things that are annually paid for by Measure P. You have 2.2 to 2.4 million for public safety department non-personnel. We beat that with the dead horse. $690,000 for Parks and Rec temporary salary costs is also built in every year. Then you have debt service costs for the police station, which are already paying for, and the library building, which are already paying for, $3.3 to $3.7 million per year. These things are built into every year in the forecast. This is what your fund balance looks like in Measure P, assuming all of these come to fruition, okay? So that's what it looks like. You still have a lot of money in Measure P that you can use for other things. All right, moving on to water fund. Now we're going to go a little quicker. In the water fund, you've got basically 9.3 million in revenue, 10.9 million in expenditures for the current year. Next year, 10.1 million in revenue, 11.9 million in expenditures. Revenues are projected to be a little bit higher due to anticipated collections of late fees, which are now coming back in, and a one-time transfer from the overfunded internal service fund. So keep in mind, just like we did in the general fund, your water fund and your wastewater fund are also going to get a one-time infusion from the overfunded internal service funds, okay? So that money is also coming into this fund. Expenditures are higher by about $1 million due to 1.4 new FTE, and that is for water maintenance worker position that was requested, and then about 40% of that project manager that you saw in the general fund. Keeping in mind the general fund's only paying for 20% of that position. Water and wastewater are paying for the other 40%. So that is here. In the water fund, you have capital that includes ADA restrooms and the water fund portion of that cost. Parking lot shades, forklift, meter replacements, and pump engine. At the end of the day, the water fund continues to be well funded, but I don't really know or understand exactly what the future capital on tap holds in terms of maintaining your permit with the state Water Resources Control Board. So whether or not 25 million is enough to make sure that you're able to address those capital needs in the future is why you have a rate study done. Okay, so that will come back to you in that form. But $25 million obviously is a good amount of money on an $11 million budget each year. Wastewater fund. Okay, wastewater fund, similarly, revenues of 11.8 in the current year, expenditures of 14.1. 25-26, 11.5 million in revenue, just under 11.5, $20 million in expenditures. Revenues are projected to be about $400,000 lower due to the removal of one-time grant revenues. There was some grant revenue that was received in the wastewater fund related to storm damage issues that actually came in. So those are removed. And basically that was over $1 million, I think, that was offset by a one-time transfer from the overfunded internal service fund. So you also have that money coming in from the ISFs. Expenditures are higher by 6.1 million due to 0.4 new FTE, which is just 40% of that project manager. And then your capital, Southern Pump Station, and hopefully the completion of that project, temporary bypass, influent diversion, blower, dewatering press, et cetera. So a lot going on there as well. And in your wastewater fund, 17.3 million will remain in reserves, working capital, fund balance, whatever you want to call it, by the end of next year, assuming all of this comes to fruition. All right, moving on to the fund groups. So what I've done is I've taken, for the next few slides, all of your fund groups that have like funds in them. So this particular group is your special revenue funds that are particularly related to transportation. You can see it encompasses gas tax, RMRA, your bus shelter, your TDA money, federal highway grants, and other LTA, local transportation authority. All those funds are listed here. So your special revenue funds for transportation have a combined budget of about $9.3 million. So there's $9.3 million in spending from special revenue funds specifically for transportation. Out of that amount, there's about $6.8 million in capital for La Bouche rewidening, street improvements, Dannenberg Drive rehabilitation, ATP 5 Imperial Avenue and bus shelters. Most of the money that is in these funds is for capital. From your gas tax fund, you actually move a lot of your gas tax money, if not all of your gas tax money, into the general fund as a transfer in to cover what the general fund pays for your street program. That's completely acceptable. It's the way the city's done business for the last a lot of years. So that is what you're using your gas tax money for, which is why your ending fund balance in that gas tax fund, the very first fund there is zero, because we use all that money every year. However, every other fund has some money left in it. So the anticipated fund balance is available for transportation, assuming we spend the $9.3 million next year. You're still going to have $8.4 million in your transportation fund. So hopefully you got a lot of transportation projects on tap because you have the money for them. Special revenue funds that are specific, well, these are other special revenues. So this is just an array of special revenue funds, okay? One thing that, well, you have $2.7 million budgeted here for these types of special revenue funds. Out of that 2.7 million, just over $1 million is capital. Most of that is for your police department's cameras. As your ARPA expenditures wind down, I think most of that money has to be spent by December. And as the ARPA winds down, you're going to be spending that. The police cameras are paid for out of your remaining ARPA funds. So that's where those are coming from. Funding includes appropriations for compensation and utility rate surveys. So that is also in that ARPA fund. The rate studies that you're doing for both water and wastewater are funded out of ARPA. And then you also have the compensation survey being paid for out of there as well. In the red there, what we've done is we've actually added a new fund to the city's mix called the Fire Special Revenue Fund. Okay, and just a little bit of background on this fund. This basically accounts for strike team revenues. Okay, so every time your fire department participates in what's called a strike team, typically through OES, the Office of Emergency Services of the state of California, they actually go out and go on that strike team as the city's representatives to help fight fires from a mutual aid perspective. Okay? All of the overtime associated with what it costs the city is reimbursed to the city, dollar for dollar. Okay? So where your fire department budget for overtime is likely to be exceeded because you participate in a strike team, keeping in mind that you're going to have to backfill the people that are gone on the strike team with other firefighters. Okay, so that results in a cost, but all those costs are reimbursed, okay? The incremental cost. As that money comes back, it offsets the overtime that is actually incurred. So it's zero, it's negated. However, in addition to the amount of reimbursement, the amount of the reimbursements that you receive for overtime, you also receive two other components. You receive an administrative component for the admin associated with the city putting together the team in the first place, and you receive an apparatus component, recognizing that the city typically sends an engine with the crew that it's sending to the fire. Those two are gravy. Okay, we'll just term them gravy. What many other cities do, and what I've talked to the fire chief about, is actually creating a special fund like many other cities and putting those two components, the apparatus component and the admin component, into this fund and funding that component of the reimbursement, which has nothing to do with the general fund or any costs there, into this fund to help ultimately defray what would otherwise be general fund costs in the future for things that come up and are needed by the fire department. So where the fire department may recognize that there is a particular training that may be mandated or required, you now have the money in the fund to be able to afford that without increasing your general fund appropriation. Where the fire department breaks a chassis on their engine, which has happened twice, unfortunately, in my career, I've told the fire chief, use the special fire fund to replace that chassis, okay? So it saves the general fund money in the future. Again, this has no impact on the general fund whatsoever, and ultimately it gives you, and more importantly, the program manager associated with providing fire service the ability to fund things in the future. So we are recommending creation of that fund as we move forward. And again, for most of these funds, they can only be used for purposes for which the funds are collected. So anything that's in a special revenue fund by definition can only be used for the purpose that it's collected. Okay, here are some police-related special revenue funds. So you got 5 of those, about $387,000 budget there. These funds are used for, well, the police fund, which is your supplemental law enforcement, Fund 223. That's used to fund a community services officer, cannabis enforcement costs, and some other police supplies and materials. You have about $40,000 in capital in the aggregate funded here, which is for safety equipment for the police department. And then again, most of these funds can only be used for law enforcement purposes, especially the asset forfeiture funds. And then you have supplemental, all these funds can only be used for law enforcement. So worked very closely with the police chief this year on the use of these funds. So this is what ultimately we came up with. Special revenue funds related to parks and some of the parks funds, you have 4 of those. So special revenue funds, $10.6 million for parks. Out of that $10.6 million, you can see that most of those park funds are capital related. Okay, so you have just under $8.9 million in capital expenditures for Gomez Park, which is funded by a Prop 68 grant, the Downtown Square project, which is funded by a California Clean Air grant. Yep. Urban Forest, Buena Vista Park. So a lot going on with parks in terms of capital and grant spending. And again, these funds can only be used for parks purposes. But you can see, you're not going to have much left at the end of the day if you do everything that we're asking. You're only going to have about $141,000 in those 4 funds combined at the end of the day, which is a good thing, spending the money that you're getting for a specific purpose. Another fund group. So you have your HUD, Housing and Urban Development, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, and home-related funds. And these are mostly federal programs for which the city receives a sum of money for a specific purpose, a very specific purpose. In these funds, you have about $1 million that's being appropriated. Of that amount, just under $400,000 is capital, and that's for HUD housing programs. $450,000 is allocated for potential loans. So some of these funds are what are called revolving funds, where you actually have loans that are ultimately paid back, and that money can be reloaned out, consistent with what's called a program reuse plan in those funds. So that is appropriated there. Sometimes it's hard to get those loans out because the requirements are so very specific and very difficult to match. But I know that they do try to get those loans out. And then the remaining funds can only be used, again, for HUD entitlement, home, DEVG, and other purposes. So this money's pretty tied up. Other fund groups, so special revenue impact fees and mitigation fees. So in the impact fees, $563,000 budget there. And essentially that is all for capital. And all of that money is being used for the remaining costs that are likely to transpire after the end of this year for the new public safety CAD, computer-aided dispatch, and RMS, record management system replacement. So that is basically all you're using those impact fees for. These remaining funds, they're AB 1600 funds, of which you're going to have a lot, can only be used for specific impact fee purposes. One thing I was going to say towards the end of this budget presentation, I'll say it now because this is a good example, is you're seeing a lot of different funds. Okay, there are a lot of different funds that the city has. What we've done in the finance department over the last year is actually looked at a lot of these funds, but have focused primarily on the general fund for obvious reasons, the Measure P fund for obvious reasons, water and wastewater, and that's pretty much it. Okay, we've really looked at those funds in their entirety. There's still some work to do there, but we haven't done that level of diligence that I think needs to be done for all of these other funds, all 9 or 86 other funds in the city. We're going to be doing that. Once this budget's approved and over the next course of the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to go through every single fund very diligently. We're going to go through the balance sheets of these funds and make sure that they're intact. We're going to go through the revenue stream. We're going to go through the expenditure stream. We're going to try to really understand exactly what it takes to run these funds, and more importantly, what you can use the money that might be left in this fund for in the future. Okay, because there's a lot of money in fund balances in these funds that maybe can be used for things that you're doing today that you just don't know about that are being funded by the general fund or Measure P. We've already found a lot of that, frankly. I'm committed with the interim finance director to doing that, and with finance staff. We're going to be going through this. In many cases, we'll be bringing in the department head and or the division manager to have that conversation with them so that they understand that these funds exist. Because frankly and candidly, they may not know. They may not know that there's funding out there from some of these funds. So no fault of theirs. It's just, hey, what's the finance department doing, and how are we going to make sure everybody understands transparently what's out there? So we will be doing that in the coming year. Other fund groups, so these are your lighting and landscape and your community facilities districts funds. You have 6 of those. Budget's about $356,000. The only thing really budgeted here are the things that are noted in your engineers reports that you've already approved. It does include addition of a half FTE maintenance worker to assist with necessary upkeep projects in the district. There is no capital built into these funds. And again, these monies just carry over from year to year for use in the specific district from which you're collected. Capital projects funds, you have an array of those. Many of these capital projects funds are done. And these are some of the funds that I really want to go through with particularly Public Works Department to help see how we might be able to use some of these ending fund balances. So your capital projects fund budget has $15.2 million. Most all of that is capital. The portion that's not capital is for like engineering costs or those sorts of soft costs associated with a capital project. So it technically could be capital. But you have Yacaranda Gardens in there, FHA projects, police station projects built into here, library, solar, and shade structure for using some of the remaining library bond money that's out there. So all those are on tap. And then you have one fund here that's negative. And thankfully, your city doesn't have a lot of funds with negative fund balances. And you'd be surprised because a lot of cities do. Okay. But this is the one fund that you do have is actually probably a fund that we can do a little more research on, and then maybe there is more money that's coming in. So a lot of cities set up a specific fund for storm damage costs that have happened, and particularly 2023 and 2024, I believe there were significant storms that hit California. Many of those storms ultimately were funded by either FEMA and or the California Office of Emergency Services through grants and contributions. This negative fund balance used to be a lot more, but we've gotten it down to 403,000. So ultimately, this may represent unreimbursable costs that were incurred by the city, but because we tracked everything, because we had to, and we had to do the work, we put them somewhere. But we will work with the Public Works Director and any other division manager that might be able to help us understand exactly what we might be able to get in the future from that fund. But ultimately, whatever's not funded will be a burden of the general fund or some other fund. Debt service funds, we got 2 more. Debt service funds, so the city has 2 debt service funds, and these are basically just conduit funds. So these funds receive money from one fund to pay the debt service for that fund. A lot of cities have it set up this way. Your city does, but that's all these funds are used for, and this is for your transportation funding, and then your LTA lease revenue bonds, which are your library and your police debt. Internal service funds. Okay, so here's a group. This is a group of funds that had a lot of attention this year, and you can see some of those beginning fund balances. So the workers' comp fund had $4.8 million in it, and you're only spending basically I think 1.6 to 1.8 a year. Okay, so you were significantly overfunded in workers' comp. OPEB and unemployment, similarly, too high of a fund balance. Group health benefits, similarly, too high of a fund balance. And then you have your motor vehicle and fleet, which I pretty much didn't touch because that's where your mechanics and everything for your fleet in the city are funded from. So that's a true internal service fund in this city. So that one's not going to be touched. But the other 3, we did move money out. and you can see what the ending fund balances are at the end of the day. I left some money in there because I want to see how this all fleshes out. So assuming we transfer the monies back to the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund, and we go through and pay for what is in these funds with the money that's left coming in, workers' compensation, health benefits, et cetera. We're still going to have $1.1 million in workers' comp, 476 in OPEB, and 567 in unemployment, and 567 in health benefits. That money too, a portion of that money may also be transferred out next year, okay, or maybe even a mid-year when we're seeing, based on what we're seeing. So there could be still some money here that can move back as fund balance into other funds. So that's pretty much what this one is. And then you have your successor agency funds. So this is the last slide with the funds in it. So successor agency funds, these house all of the activity associated with the dissolution of the redevelopment agencies in the state of California, I believe in 2011 that occurred, and the winding down of everything that had happened up to that point. What your city has is only two components left, and that's basically the debt service on the bonds that were issued before 2011 that you're paying for each year, and ultimately an admin component, which is very small, just under $35,000 or so that comes in for the administrative costs associated with those bonds, trustee fees, staff costs, et cetera. Ultimately, these funds will all go away. So once everything's paid off and redevelopment's done, all these funds will go away. And what's happening is your former tax increment money, property taxes that used to be paid into redevelopment before it was dissolved, to the extent it's not needed, the counties are still computing what that tax increment would have always been. But to the extent it's not needed anymore, keeping in mind you can't add any new expenses. You haven't been able to since 2011. The amount of unused, what's called redevelopment property tax trust fund money, that former increment, is being converted into property tax and paid to all the affected taxing entities, okay, all ATEs, that are in each one of the tax rate areas in the city. So not only the city is receiving this in the form of property tax, but also all the other jurisdictions, primarily the school districts, county receives a portion, et cetera. So anybody that receives a component of property tax in this city, in each one of your tax rate areas, is receiving that unused money. Okay, budget forecast and developments and next steps. So we're going to continue to update your general fund and Measure P forecast. And you can see if you've been watching these forecasts over the course of the last 10 months that they've been presented, they change. They're very fluid, okay? And they change for a variety of reasons. And we're telling you what those reasons are every time they do change. We would like to prepare and bring to the council a quarterly fiscal report for next year. So sometime in likely, the first quarter ends September 30th, so maybe the end of October, first part of November, we'll bring that quarterly report to you. We'll bring a mid-year report to you in February probably. And then again in early May, we'll bring a third quarter report before we do the budget. So you're going to see what's going on more frequently. We're not going to bring every fund as part of that quarterly report. What we'll likely do is bring the major funds and then any other fund that has a significant amount of activity that we want your council to know about for decision-making purposes. So we do want to do quarterly reports. We're in the process of getting ready to close fiscal 24-25, the current year. Once we have those preliminary results and ending fund balances, which will likely take 2 months, typically you work through the end of August to do all your accruals, all your true ups, make sure everything's posted, all your payables and everything. Once that's done, we'll come back to you with a report on that, on what we're seeing, at least preliminarily, for fiscal 24-25. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to review all citywide funds very, very finely with a fine-tooth comb to determine possible uses where necessary. Because just in the last, year, I'm amazed at what we found and what we're able to do with this city's budget, and with the number of funds you have, I'm 100% certain there's more out there. So I will stop with that. I am done, and I will turn it back to your council for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Andy and Liz and team. You guys all do a wonderful job. Council, we had the opportunity yesterday. Andy gave us an open door and Liz, and if we wanted to come in and ask questions or talk or ask anything about the budget, so that was very helpful to where we will have a good mindset today. But I do open this right now if the colleagues have anything that they would like to say. But I did have the opportunity to meet with them yesterday and get a lot of good insights. If not, if we got,
I have something to say. I have some concerns regarding the new positions that were added on. I understand that you have the $2 million that was added to cover salary, the compensation study that we're currently undergoing. But because I've been hearing that the salary that's being paid right now to our staff, that some of it is very underpaid and some of it may be close. And I know that you stated that it would be good to, it's good for a 10%, which some could be higher and some could be lower. But I don't feel comfortable knowing that at this point that we have not concluded or even began the compensation study on everybody, on all of our employees, and we don't know where they're going to fall. If $2 million is going to be adequate at this point. And in all fairness to our employees, because they have been waiting for some time for this compensation study, we look at some groups that I've heard, without naming them, are very underpaid, but yet they're one of the highest groups paid already. That's going to be a significant amount of money when we look at maybe other groups that'll get a 3 versus a 20%, or, you know, and that's just numbers I'm throwing out there. So again, this, we were very grateful for the meeting. It helped me a lot to understand. However, I was just given this book yesterday, and it's really difficult to try to go through something in one day. And I think it's unfair to be able to make a decision like this without going line by line. I appreciate and understand everything that you're saying here, but looking, I know that you have it already built in. I understand all that, but I just don't feel comfortable knowing that at this time that we could add these positions without ensuring that the employees have a compensation, a fair chance at getting an adequate compensation applied to them. And so I just want to say at this point, I've been looking at the positions, and I did have a question on your side. I was looking at this page, actually, the page 21 of what you gave us, but am I missing the water treatment plant position? Or is that part of the 2 parks maintenance workers?
No, that's not part of this table that's on the current slide.
Okay.
So that's separate, that's mentioned separately on the wastewater
Okay,
slide.
but it's
Yeah.
still included with all of this, with the new positions?
Yes, it's in addition to what's in this
What,
table.
in
Yes, that's
addition
right.
to this table?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't see it there, so I wanted to make
As are the
sure.
portions of the other positions that are mentioned here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just, like I said, at this point, one of them, the senior traffic signal technician, I did ask yesterday for the job description, and I understand that sometimes things are done after the point, after the fact. But it's difficult for me to approve a position that is very detailed as far as the title without knowing what the job expectations are, that we can't move an employee out of that specific box. And so it's hard for me to be able to do that without an explanation of, you're asking for a job, but there's no job description attached. And the other 2, the lieutenant and the deputy fire chief, I understand the need. I understand the deputy fire chief position's been vacant maybe since 2019, about there. And the lieutenant position has been vacant since about 3 years ago, I believe. And I understand that these are things that need to be done, because in the best interest of the department and so forth, but do we have to do them now prior to the compensation? Because we don't have anything before us. We've had one group assign, and we don't know what those numbers are gonna be. And I think in all fairness to the employees, I'm glad, I'm very glad to see that our temporaries are being reclassified to full-time. But I think now for the full-time employees to make sure that they're given that opportunity to get a significant, as close to what they're supposed to be paid as possible, and then come back and look at this, whether it be 6 months or something. But I think at this point, to do this and not take care of our employees first, the ones that need to have their salaries revised, to me is unfair. Especially because this is the first time I'm seeing these, well, this last week, seeing these new positions come in. So there's a lot of questions when things are just brought to us with no backing.
And I think we're at correct me if I'm wrong, acting city manager, I think we're at the point of no return right now, right? We're at, this has been something that's been into play already. And this is what we need to work with right now.
So there are a number of ways that you can move forward today. You can move forward and adopt the budget as presented by Andy and his team. You can amend the motion and adopt it without these positions as being discussed. Or you can actually postpone this vote until a future meeting. That said, we do have some deadlines that we do need to meet to work on, and I would not recommend postponing the entire budget to a future meeting.
I wouldn't recommend postponing, but I just want to say, just so that everyone's aware where I stand, to have positions brought up just like this with a couple of days discussion and no backing is very difficult to make a decision. And with that being said, I had said yesterday when we spoke that I was okay moving forward with a couple of the positions. And I'm just one vote, but I'm just going to say it because I'm here to make sure that, and I ran on making sure that employees were taken care of. And so first, so I want the ones that I'm okay on moving forward on are the ones obviously that we already approved, which are the maintenance workers for downtown and the district, the custodian 2 for the police building, the secretarial assistant, because of the CDBG 40% grant, if that's correct. The project manager, civil design, based on the 80% of the enterprise fund that's being utilized for that position. And the staff assistant for the library. I understand that that's a reclass from library assistant, but the reason I'm saying that is because the volume of people that go through that library with the same amount of staff that's been there for I don't know how long. And that is definitely something we need to look at. But
So then now what I ask colleagues is that either we make a motion to approve this, or either we making a motion to approve some of it because we do have deadlines and we pull what we can right now, or how do you guys want to go about this?
Can I ask a question? Is there a way that we could approve the budget as written with a placeholder on this funding and then take on these individual positions as a council at a later time? The money would be set aside for those positions, and then we would have a little bit of time to go through with some more backup, but the money would be sitting there. And of course, if there's some positions that we don't, it would slide back into the general fund. Would that be something that we would be able to do?
You can make a motion to approve with no action taking on these positions that were outlined under the motion until which time you reconvene and have an opportunity to have further discussion. Yes, that can be done.
Say it one
So
more
is
time.
that your motion?
Mr. Sawyer, say that one more time.
So you can make a motion to adopt the budget as presented and for lack of a better purpose, not move forward with these positions or freeze the spending of funds related to these positions until the council's had further opportunity to have discussion, come back at a later time and then make a vote to move forward and expend those funds, or to make an adjustment. The budget's a living
The
document.
amendment, yes.
Yeah, correct. You have that ability to do that today, to adopt the budget as presented, and then with these funds or with these specific positions, hold those funds in abeyance until you have an opportunity to readdress it.
So Councilmember Crenshaw, was that your motion to do?
Well,
You
Well,
spoke
there
on
might
it.
be more
may I
discussion.
ask some questions,
Yes,
before we make
sure.
any motions? So, Mr. Heath, those positions that are in question, okay, I'm sure that and I know you're conservative in terms of when you're preparing the budget. The monies that were allocated, were those based on market values within other cities? Or were they just a range of, within a certain salary range, midpoint maybe? And that's based on market values?
To my knowledge, and
Yes, you-
HR director can back me up on this,
Mhm.
any position that is already a bona fide position with a salary table
Mhm.
in the city, we knew what that salary was, so we just took the difference. There may have been one or two positions that don't have current job classifications, where what you just said is what we did.
Yeah,
So we looked at the market, we may have looked at other cities, and actually considered that and just took a range to compute what that ultimate value would be.
yes, so you've taken those factors into consideration. And then in regards to the compensation study, I know that you have presented to us at least twice already. And based on, what we're looking at, to bring our employees up to market value, you calculated a 1%, and then based on what we think we're going to come in at, you've calculated an estimate, and you projected that out, let's say the 1% was 200,000, okay?
Correct.
And if it turns out that we give our employees a 10%, then that would then account to about what, 2 million?
Right.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
so,
And that
and
10%
those
across the board,
across the board.
knowing that some positions
Right,
are going
and
to
those are
be.
going to fluctuate,
Yes.
but they're going to then even out, based upon, okay, let's say hypothetically speaking, I don't want to give anybody any, hope that we're going to give you a 20% raise, but let's say that some come in short of 15% market value, but then others are maybe, a 7 or an 8. Okay, so eventually all of that is going to even out, correct? Am I?
Eventually, there
No.
will be a bottom line number. What that number
yeah.
is, I don't know. I'm not
Okay.
pegging it to be 10% either.
Exactly.
No.
It's just
Right.
ironic that,
Yes.
that it's 10%, nice round number
Mhm.
Yeah.
that was left over when I put everything together. And that's why I talked about the 2 million in the context of the 2,017,000.
Yeah, and that's, and
Yeah.
that's why, at this point, I'm comfortable, because you've taken all these factors into consideration, and I'm comfortable adopting the budget as is, to move forward with it. Now, I know some of my colleagues don't feel the same way, but, I mean, I speak from experience. I just finished my budget at, my place of employment. I wish mine was as healthy as this, but the reality is it's not. But I'm just grateful that we ended in the black instead of in the red, as a projected outcome. So, that's where, I know that we've been talking about this for a few months now, and I know that this is something that we've taken into great consideration, what this comp study will then result in. And that's why I'm comfortable adopting as is.
My question is just to follow Councilmember Maruquin is, so you're guaranteeing that all the comp studies are going to be able to be covered to bring everybody up with the $2 million?
I'm not guaranteeing anything.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm
Absolutely
hearing
not.
over here.
No.
Yes.
I know he's not, I'm
I don't-
being
I don't-
facetious.
I don't think I ever represented that I was
Yeah,
guaranteeing.
well, I'm
No,
just saying
there
based
are
on
no
what her.
there are no
what-
guarantees.
I know,
in-
but based on
in
how you
life here,
stated it,
you
I
know,
just
and-
wanted
It's
to
just-
clarify.
it's
Let
just
me,
a
let me
number.
just
Sir.
ask another question.
These are just
The-
projections.
When you stated that the 6.5 million for the ECRMC transfer is already included in there, there's another aspect
I'm
that,
sorry, I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I'm sorry. When you stated that the 6.5 million for the ECRMC transfer,
Okay, yeah.
it was going to be
Yeah,
paid out. There's another element that the city has to pay. We don't know what that's going to be at this time. Has that been figured into the budget?
No, because I have no knowledge of what that cost is,
Okay.
or more importantly,
No
what the funding
estimate.
source is.
Right, okay.
Yes.
And when you talk about the 6.2 million one-time transfer
Mhm.
from the overfunded internal service
Correct.
fund, and that goes into the general fund? Is that where it went into?
It'll go into three funds.
Three funds.
Okay, it'll go into the general fund, the water fund, and the wastewater fund. And it's going in, back into those funds the same way it was taken out, which is based on a percentage of salary
Okay, so,
in those funds.
so without moving that 6.2 million out, we would still be okay without putting that 6.2
In those
million
internal service funds, yes, you will,
Okay, in all
Yes.
three funds?
in all three funds.
Okay.
In fact, if you go back, I'm going to go back that slide real quick. That's why I discussed in these funds, you can see I still have fund balances remaining once you make those transfers. So workers' compensation still has 1.1 million. OPEB still has under half a million in group health. And then the motor vehicle is not, that one's not being considered. But yeah, so there's, and I did that purposely because I want to see ultimately what happens at the end of the day. Chances are more money can be moved into those funds from these funds.
And if for some reason with the 2 million that's being set aside, after we get all this, the compensation reports, if there's not enough for certain groups to get them to where they're the steady states that they should be, what do we do?
So you're saying if it's more than 2 million or, okay, so yeah, that's a good question. Let me go for that and answer that. Okay, so this is what your future looks like, at least today. Keep in mind, I didn't say this yet in this meeting, I'm gonna say it now. These forecasts are only as good as on the day they're presented, okay? It's gonna change tomorrow, okay? Nonetheless, this is what it looks like today. So those numbers in the future, starting in 26, 27, account for that $2 million ongoing.
Right.
Okay, so out, gone. Look at the numbers though, starting in 26, 27. Right now, we're projecting that you're going to have another 700 potentially. And then that 700 follows it up in 27, 28. Then you go down to 400, and that's because of that CalPERS issue. But I talked about that.
Right.
Hopefully it's not as bad as is built into this. And then it goes up to 1 million. So you still have, and I'm not suggesting that you do this in any way, shape, or form, you still have money on the table, at least from a forecast perspective, to address your compensation survey final results if it comes in at more at 2 million. You still may not dip into, those reserves at all. You still have fluidity in your surpluses to address a portion of that. So if it comes in at 2.5 million, I would suggest to you that you can afford that.
All right, thank you.
Madam Mayor and Council, if it would help for the discussion, several of the department heads are prepared to discuss those specific positions if need be, just to make that available to you.
So I want to mention that this is such a complex, and it was a great presentation. It's been a great effort in the short period of time, just seeing everyone should be happy with where we're at. And I can certainly understand some of the comments. We're trying to be as thorough as possible. But with the raises or with the amount that was listed, it's like 1.2% of the entire, you were talking about 200,000 per, if every employee, we have like 1% right there, just in that 245 that you showed. I'm 100% behind this budget presentation, and I think I'm satisfied with that we have some funding sources that we can use if need for moving on. So I just want to thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Good job, yes. And thank you to all the department heads as well.
Yes.
You have a big part in this behind the scene, yes. Thank you. So, yes,
Madam
now,
Mayor?
yes.
So I just want to say, I don't feel These reclass, some of them are almost funded themselves already. They're fine. But there are some that are not. So I don't feel comfortable in view of negotiating with all of our city employees. I don't feel comfortable doing this first, setting this in cement first, that we ought to be, I just feel like it's bad timing. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this. I'm just feeling like it's bad timing that we should have our negotiations first. And because it's going to be very complex, I anticipate. And so I think that I feel way more comfortable doing that first and then addressing these.
Well, we
That's-
can make a motion to approve and then just,
Okay.
look at them later. That's what acting city manager was saying, that we can approve and look at the job descriptions later. Or the
So
jobs.
yes, you have several options. You can approve the budget without these positions and move forward in that manner. You can approve the budget with the positions and give direction that further discussion needs to be taken place between council and brought back for a vote at a future date. But I would highly recommend that we adopt the budget, given the
Yes.
Mhm.
the
Yes.
timing of everything.
Right.
We need to adopt the budget today would be my
Yes,
strong
yes.
urging.
Yes.
Now, what form that takes, it's up to whoever makes the motion
Yeah.
to move forward with that. And again, it can be adopted as is, it can be adopted with the removal of those positions, and then finance can go back and remove those positions, bring it back at a future time, or we can adopt it as is with understanding that those positions are not to be filled until further direction and discussion has been had by council.
Okay, council, so now we need,
Well, I motion to adopt the budget as presented, as is.
can I get a second,
I
please?
second that.
Motion passes 3-0 with 2
3-2.
noes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Andy.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
I know Andy's like, what's going on? Thank
Andy's like,
you.
what happened?
Thank you so much to you and your team. We have a lot of faith in you and we appreciate everything that you guys do. And now it's time to move forward. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Now, moving on to number 5, that will be continued to July 15th, correct?
It may be continued after that, but for now, yes, July 15th.
Okay.
And Mr. May, who had asked to speak, sent me a text indicating that as long as this item is continued, he no longer wishes to speak.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, well, now with that being said, we will now reconvene into closed session. Thank you very much.